Hello friends and welcome back. All right, I have several cards to share with you today and they all focus on creating background patterns with your dies. Now, as usual, I just had a general plan. I turned on the camera and I started creating. So you're going to see me go from one end of the design spectrum to the other end of the design spectrum. And I'm actually super glad I did because I came up with cards at the end that I loved even better than what I started with. Okay, for these cards, we're going to be using all the same dies. This is one of the large dies of the month from Spellbinders. This is typing class. It's got this great typewriter in it. And you can see here on the back, you can put together this super cute typewriter. Now, what I loved about this die was the florals. And this is honestly why I bought this die. The typewriter is awesome. I know I'll use it. However, these florals here, they're gold. They're timeless and they'll never go out of style. Next, I picked a color palette. I'm going to use Concord and Ninth's Grapefruit. I've pulled Peacock here, but I switched that to their Ocean something. I'll have it linked below. The Aqua Sky and their Midnight. This technique is perfect for using up all of your scraps. So I went ahead and pulled my scraps in those colors, and then I added in a neutral as well, which is going to be white. I need something to rest the eye with all of these different colors, and then for a little bit of pizzazz, a little bit of something special, I grabbed some mirrored cardstock, the gold mirrored cardstock from Spellbinders. Now I'm going to pick my dies that I'm going to use to create my background. I need something large, something mid-sized, and something small. So I'm going to use that Monstera leaf, and then these two leaf sprigs, one is large, one is small. That's going to be my main base of my pattern for all of my cards today. And that's one of my tips. When you're creating a pattern, simplify. So I've chosen these three main elements to create the bulk of my pattern. And then I will come in and fill in the gaps of that pattern with different little flowers and things. So this is just going to make it less cumbersome, less overwhelming to create that pattern. I have less elements to work with, so it'll be easier for me to create a more random tossed pattern. If I had too many pieces or too many elements, I would definitely try to get too methodical with making sure that they were evenly placed. Here I'm only working with 3 for the bulk of the pattern, so it's going to make it a lot easier. Now we're just going to die cut, die cut, die cut. A lot of die cutting, you guys. I'm going to cut these out of every color that I have chosen. And yes, I'm cutting Monstera leaves from grapefruit colored cardstock. Do they grow that way in nature? No. Can I create them that way in art? Absolutely. This is your world. You're creating it. Do whatever you want. So I'm going to cut this, like I said, from all of my colors. And I'm going to do that for each of my elements. As I've shown you guys before, I'm using the Bitty Buzz Cutter from Honeybee to do my die cutting. I just prefer the littler one when I'm doing a lot of die cutting like this. Like I said, less passes, cranks through faster, so it actually ends up taking less time. Now, if you wanted to, you could die cut each of your elements on your larger die cut and stack a whole bunch of them on there at one time. My plates are so warped that they will move and bounce around. They won't stay. I'd have to tape every single one of them, and that would just add more time. So this is the best method for me, and I love that it just sits right there on the desktop and I can put on some Netflix and die cut away. Now, as I mentioned, we're going to add flowers to fill in our gaps. So here I'm using one of the little flower dies from that same typing class, and I'm typing that from white, and then I'm also going to cut another, did I say typing that? Die cutting that from white. And then I'm also going to die cut it from that gold mirror cardstock. I'm going to layer these on top of each other. You wait till you see, guys. Just adds that little peak of sun. It's so cute, so cute. You'll see here. All right. On this die, you'll see that there's also a flower and a flower center, like a daisy-like flower, and then a center that goes in the middle there. We're going to use just that center of that daisy flower. We're going to use it in the gold, and we're going to use it to create some bling in between the bare spaces of our pattern. Again, you will see here in a second, just everything can be used, you guys. Look at everything in a different way. Look at it creatively. It can all be used for something other than what it was intended to be used for. They're basic shapes. Okay, once I had a good amount of die cuts created here, I know I wanted to stack some of them so that they were a little bit thicker than the others. This would just give a little bit of different dimension to the card base, add a little interest back there. And you'll also notice that I have some other colors cut. I couldn't resist, I was die cutting. I knew that I wouldn't want to create several cards in the exact same color So I decided to just pull out some hibiscus, a little evergreen, a little bit of their marmalade, and yeah, I actually end up die cutting a lot more, but I couldn't help it. You'll see. Things just started morphing. Once you get started, sometimes it's hard to stop. And really, that experimenting is where some of the best ideas come from. Here, I decided that I wanted to put these little flowers, and why not double them up? Why not stack them? So here I alternated. I did some with the gold mirror cardstock on top, and then I did others with the white cardstock on top. Again, I didn't know which one I wanted to use at the time. I haven't created my pattern, but here I have options, and I actually end up using both of them. So it worked out well. To build my patterns, I like to start with my largest element first. Now, the Monstera leaf is not technically the largest. That other leaf sprig there is longer. However, this holds the most visual weight because it is the most solid and it is also wider. So it does look as though it would be the largest. Your eye is going to see those Monstera leaves first. So I'm covering the background first with those, and I'm working in threes, and then I'm going to come in and fill in some of the larger bare spots with that larger leaf segment. And I've chosen these in the aqua sky because they are a lighter color. Both that ocean and the grapefruit are midtones. So this lighter aqua sky is going to give the eye a little bit of relief from those darker colors. And then any other little empty areas that I have that are large enough, I'm going to fill in with those flowers that I created. Here, I'm definitely going to use some of that white. I love white. I can't help it. It's the perfect neutral. And like I said, it really brings a brightness. So when you're using a lot of colors like this, especially this color palette, which is kind of dusty, not dusty sounds horrible, but muted. They're pretty beautiful colors, but they are a little muted. So that white actually brightens them up a little bit and keeps them from looking dusty. Now, gold is a beautiful companion color for navy. There's just something very classic and sophisticated about gold and navy. So those little flower centers, we're going to add those in between all of the rest of the bare spots. But I'm going to take them off because I'm going to add them on last, because I'm not trying to pick those up with press and seal and glue them down. So we're going to take off the dots and we're going to pick up the whole pattern with our press and seal. Now I'm using liquid adhesive here, and I'm just going to adhere everything directly to my A2 card base. And if you've not seen the press and seal trick, I will link my die cutting tips and tricks video in the description box below. So make sure you check that out. I'm going to use something heavy just to give this a second to adhere. And then when I pull this away, my pattern is perfectly in place. I will turn that over and we'll trim off any of the dies that are hanging over. And now I can come in and add the little gold dots to kind of fill in all of the rest of the gaps in the pattern. Now there are some little tiny gold dots here. I got those from the Parcel and Post die set from Spellbinders, and I will show that to you here in just a little bit because I actually end up using some more pieces from that set in a subsequent card. So these are little flower centers that it cuts, and they're little tiny flower centers, and again they were perfect for creating different sized little dots. Okay, so now we have our base plan for a good strong design. Let's pump up those colors a little bit. We're going to use the exact same base plan here, those Monstera leaves and the leaf segments. But you'll notice that we're going to just brighten everything up. I've swapped the grapefruit for the hibiscus, which is a brighter pink. Then I've swapped that ocean for this peacock, which is more of a jewel tone color. Super gorgeous together. And then the aqua sky that we used for the leaf segments, I pushed that to the background and swapped that for the sprout. So this is a nice, beautiful, springy green. And again, the other two colors are darker midtones, and this sprout is a brighter, lighter color. So it's going to punch up those colors even more. Again, we're not reinventing the wheel here, using that same base pattern. And now I've looked at some of the other things that I had die cut. And these came from the Parcel and Post die from Spellbinders. It's another great die set. It has the mailbox and a bunch of florals. Again, I bought that set. The mailbox is nice, but I really bought it for the florals because I knew that they would be so versatile year round. So here is a little berries, a stem of berries. And I've die cut that using Concord and Ninth's marmalade. And it has these little dots to create the berries, but I thought, why don't I create a new flower? So something, it's not quite Queen Anne's lace because Queen Anne's lace has a bunch of tiny, tiny little flowers that sprout out from a center point like that. But something, I mean, that was my inspiration. My inspiration was the Queen Anne's lace. But instead, I'm going to take that flower from the typing class die, and we're going to cover each of these little berry areas with a little bud. So here I'm testing it out with some of the die cuts I already had out, and I'm like, yes, I like it, but we're going to do them all in white. So I pulled out my bitty buzz cutter again because I needed to die cut some more of those flowers. And then that's when I looked over and I saw the evergreen monstera leaves. And I was like, I wonder. And I swapped it out and I liked it even better. Now I like this better because it is a even deeper shade than the hibiscus, whereas the peacock and the hibiscus are about the same shade. This is deeper and it adds some drama, and I really, really liked that. So again, don't be afraid to change your mind. I went ahead and die cut those and I've adhered them. And here you can see I created this new little imaginary flower. And again, all that white is just going to add a nice place for the eye to rest. And it's also going to make those colors a little more clean. So I love the way this one turns out to be, I don't know. This one and the next one, I have a hard time deciding which one's my favorite. You'll have to let me know in the comments below. But I'm going to fit that in, and I'm going to just kind of rotate things so that it fits in there nicely. Remember, nothing is adhered at this point, so we can shift things around as needed. I'll create 2 more of those because I work in 3s in a triangle pattern. It just always works out well that way, keeps it balanced, and it's kind of a no-fail way to design pattern. And just like before, once I've got everything where I want it, we're going to use that press and seal to pick everything up and glue everything down. And just like in the last card, it's all getting adhered directly to the card base. But because those monsteras and our flowers have a little bit of depth to them, it's going to add a lot of interest. And finally, add in our little gold dots in the background. And I loved this tropical vibe, so I decided to create another background. Again, I just swapped out a few colors. Reversed the background and the leaf sprigs and decided, what if we add some tropical birds to this? Now, I don't have any actual tropical bird dies, but I do have this little chickadee and this sweet birdie die from Spellbinders. And they're kind of stylistic. They're very illustrative in their style. So I was like, these will be perfect. I'll die cut these from coordinating colors in some tropical flair, and they will read as tropical. So I'm going to die cut all of the pieces from some of those scraps. Look, I'm using up all of those little scraps, and I'm using the colors that we've used in our card base. Here you can see I'm thinking about what other color do I want to incorporate, and I decided to do the sprout, the peacock, and the aqua sky. And for these are littler dies, so I'm just going to put as many as I can on my plate at once and go ahead and die cut them all at once. And now I can start assembling everything. I'm using my sweet petunia sticky mat here to hold my die in place while I layer everything up. For these little birds, I like to start with their beak. Everything fits together kind of like a puzzle piece on this base. And the beak is kind of the guide for where everything else will butt up against. I've tried it other ways. I've tried starting with the wing and things like that. And then if I don't get that wing placement just right, the beak won't fit. And you'll see here what I'm talking about in just a second. So if I start with the beak and then I go to the cap, you can see here everything will fit up against that beak, each of these layers here. So like I said, like to start with that beak first because I can line it up against the edge of the die cut on the right side and then fit everything in like a puzzle piece. So I created this little chickadee, and then I also created the little birdie, sweet birdie. I'll have it linked below. And then I have these cute little tropical birds that I can now put into my background pattern. However, I'm going to wait to adhere them until I get my sentiment in place. So here are the 4 backgrounds that I created, and I could have kept going, but I decided to stop here. I love that we have 2 very elegant styles, and then we have 2 very bright and colorful styles, all using the same basic supplies. For the sentiment, we're going to finish them all the same. We're going to use the Parcel and Post mailbox. There is a glimmer plate that goes with this, and then the die here to cut out the sentiment. This is going to be perfect for all of the cards, even though they are different styles. It's going to work for all of them. And because we used that gold in the background throughout all of the patterns there, we can just use gold foil for all of our sentiments. And that means we're going to need our glimmer machine. So I've got that out and it's heating up. And here is the all occasion mailbox greeting set. Now this one has 1 Christmas sentiment and then 3 all occasion sentiments. I really love this one. They have a couple other plates here that coordinate with that mailbox die, but I liked this one because it kind of covered a lot of occasions and it was just good bang for your buck. Okay, so I'm going to push my platform in on my glimmer machine, and this is going to start it heating up. I've picked out some scrapped colors. I'm going to heat foil my sentiment on some of these colors. And now I'm going to go ahead and construct my little foil sandwich here. I've got my colored cardstock. I'm going to put my foil shiny side up and then my die image side down. So the good side of the die or the good side of the plate always faces the good side of the foil. I'm going to trim that foil down. I've discovered that the less foil you have, the less extra foil you have, the better your results. And because I am going to be doing this on colored cardstock, which is notoriously finicky when it comes to foiling, I'm going to make sure that I trim that down. Now I push my timer button, and when that stops flashing the solid, it's ready to go through my machine. And in the meantime, I'm going to set up another little sandwich here and get that ready to go. This time I'm going to do one on white. Now, like I said, colored cardstock is notoriously difficult to foil on, and that is because typically colored cardstock the fibers are not as smooth. They're a little more textured, and the smoother and tighter the fibers on your cardstock, the better foiling results you're going to get. But I'm going to show you how to fix any overfoiling, because I definitely got a lot of overfoiling on this green. So I'm going to peel that away. Be careful, that plate's going to be hot. And you can see how much overfoiling I have there. It looks a hot mess. The MVP for foiling is the mono sand eraser. I'm going to lightly sand over this entire thing. I used to be very careful and try to avoid the foiled image. You don't have to. You can just sand right over the whole thing. Because this does a letterpress and a foil transfer, that foil is pressed into the paper. So you can just sand all over it and it'll be just fine. Okay, when I sent that first one through my die cutting machine, I went forward and then backwards through again. So I applied the pressure twice. So just to see if I'd get different results, I'm going to do the green again. So I'm going to set it up on my plate, and then once it's ready, I'm going to send it through the die cutting machine, but I'm only going to do it once, and we'll see the difference here. But in the meantime, I'm going to continue cleaning this one up. And I'm leaving all of this in because I want to show you exactly the results that I'm getting. So like I said, this first time I went on this sprout colored cardstock from Concord and Ninth. I used just the glimmer plate shim and the clear plate, sent it through forward and then backwards. And here you can see that's that mono eraser, that sand eraser. It took away all of the overfoiling and there is no damage to the paper. And again, for experimentation purposes, I'm going to take that exact same paper and I'm going to run it through my die cut machine just once. So I'm just going to crank it through forward and then I'm going to reveal the results. And I want to see if I get less overfoiling than I did the first time. And I absolutely got less overfoiling. It's not, the first time, remember we had a ton of overfoiling. So even though that first piece came out usable after using the sand eraser, this one's going to require less cleanup. So that's just something to keep in mind. There are so many different brands and types of colored cardstock out there. You may have to do a little experimenting when it comes to the colored cardstock. White, the super smooth white paper is always going to be the easiest to do the foiling, but the colored cardstock is going to require some experimenting. And again, I'm just leaving this all in to show you. And we're super close now. I wanted to point out that I do sand it in different directions, both horizontally and vertically, and I'm also using a very light sanding motion. I'm not trying to sand a hole into the paper, I'm just trying to sand off that layer of foil where I don't want it. So don't use too much pressure. There you go, looks perfect. Off camera, I did several colors. So I did some in the green, the navy, gray, and white. And you can see here that all of them look great and usable. And now I just get to decide which ones I want to put on which card. But before I do that, I'm going to die cut these out using that die from the parcel and post mailbox. So I've taped one in place here, and then I'm going to send that through my die cut machine. And then I've got the perfect little die cut square. And I'll just repeat this for all of the remaining sentiments and decide which to put on which cards. But before we review the finished cards, I've got 2 more tips to share with you. So we did a lot of die cutting and we're going to have a lot of leftover pieces, and this is how I store them. So I'm using a small stamp storage bag here, and all of the leftover die cuts I'm going to store inside one of these little storage bags. Now you could use a Ziploc bag, you could have, whatever you're used to using. I just happen to have a lot of these stamp storage bags, so I'm going to put all of the extra pieces that belong to one particular die set. I'm going to put those into the coordinating bag. You can see here I've got a ton of extra die cuts, and the wonderful thing is I can use these now on future cards without having to do a bunch of die cutting, or I have them at the ready if I just need a little something. So I will then just store those with the die inside of a large stamp pocket. So there we go. Now it's ready for me when I want to use this set again. And I'll just repeat that same thing with all of the leftover die cuts that I have. I've done the same thing with the birds here. You can see that I've got those left over. And then as well with that parcel and post mailbox, I use that one a lot, you guys. I use it a lot. You can see all of those extra die cuts I have in there. Yeah, the extra foiled sentiments, I'm storing those with the foil plate. And ooh, I bet you I could make a lot more cards just from the stuff that I already have die cut. Now I want to go get creating again. All right, so the second tip I have for you. Now sometimes when we die cut, we can get those little paper hairs or fibers that are left on the edges of the die cut. And I used to sit and try to get those off after I die cut the individual elements. But what I have discovered to be much easier is to take an inexpensive stiff brush and just brush it all over the die cuts after I've assembled the card, especially if things are adhered directly to the card base. I can really get into each of those little crevices with this brush and just brush away all of those little paper hairs, those little paper fibers. And this works perfectly. I'll just brush them all loose and then just blow them away, and it looks perfect. So there you can see I don't have a bunch of those little furry hairs, those little furry paper hairs anymore. And I'll just repeat that with all of the cards. All right, so now it's time to review all of the cards. I'm so happy with how these turned out. So we started with this navy blue, very elegant design, right? And here I chose the navy blue sentiment. I love this. I loved it so much that I pretty much replicated the exact design, except for this time I put it on a gray card base. So I laid out my elements pretty much in all the exact same spots, used the exact same colors for the leaves and everything, picked it up with my press and seal, and then adhered it to a gray background. Super easy. Took no time at all. Next up we have our tropical beauties. Now, I love this slimline card. I'm starting to become a huge fan of slimlines. I don't know, there's just something about the larger space. These flowers here, love them. Love, love, love them. And again, those were something I created that just off the cuff. That, of course, morphed into our bird card. I think this one might be my favorite. I would love to know what you guys think. Which one is your favorite? Leave it in the comments below. Here you can see I used pretty much the same color combo. I swapped out our Monstera leaf. Instead of using the evergreen, I used the peacock. And then for the leaf sprigs there, I reversed it. So it was green on a blue background. For this one, I made them blue on the green background. Then our little birds, oh, they're just so cute. Here, I took that one bird, I trimmed him off. He was going off the page. The part that I trimmed off, I just adhered to the other side of the page. So now it looks like one continuous pattern, like this was cut from a larger pattern. Who says you can't use those focal point dies in the background? I think these turned out fantastic. And I had so much fun creating them. I love how they morphed from a very elegant design into a fun, quirky, tropical design. And sometimes that's just how it goes. I really hope that you guys enjoyed this video. Don't forget, if you're looking for any of the supplies, they'll be listed in the description box below. As always, I want to thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderfully creative day. Bye.